Vidding and a lot of remix is how a lot of intelligent people and creative people talk about popular culture, and it needs to happen now through fair use and not, not necessarily through copyright extension.
Hi, this is Art Brodsky, and we're here with Francesca Coppa, English professor, feminist, vidder. So let's start the discussion. What is vidding, and who are vidders?
Yeah, vidders are a community of largely female filmmakers who have been editing together music videos out of pieces of pop culture, television and movies, for about 30 years. Vidders started working in the 70s with slides, and then worked in the 80s and 90s with VHS cassette tape, and would re-edit together these bits of pop culture to popular music, often to point out themes, to make critiques, sometimes to celebrate the source, and they would share it with each other, usually either at conventions or on video cassettes that they would compile. And obviously vidding as an art form has exploded in the last 10 years with the rise of digital footage, computer editing software, and the internet as a distribution mechanism.
So in the past, it was sort of like a homebrew thing where you'd all get together and, show each other cassettes or do your editing or whatever.
Yes, that's right. Well, the first vids were shown at conventions, which is where people got sort of the idea to do it. A woman named Candy Fong actually started making slideshows that she would take to science fiction conventions and other kinds of media fan conventions, and they would be shown there. And then people then started to make their own vids. Some people made vids exclusively for kind of yearly gatherings at conventions, but increasingly people then started to make and distribute vids on VHS cassette. So my first vids that I ever saw came, I have show and tell. You would mail away for a video cassette, and a group of vidders tended to work in collectives because at the time VHS was actually quite expensive. I have to get it in the frame.
There you go.
Yeah, VHS was actually an expensive technology when it came out in the early 80s. And so groups of vidders would often share equipment. I mean, an editing VCR, which was easier to work with, could be $2,000. So a group of vidders would work together. And you had kind of wonderful collections like, this is a tape from a group called the Rhodes Society, or there was a group called the Media Cannibals, or there was a group called the Chicago Loop. And women would work together, and not only to make vids collaboratively, but then would also distribute them on VHS cassette, which you could then kind of get through the mail. And this is all, things that happened before we had an internet. The internet makes things much, much easier in terms of sharing and distributing vids.
What else did the internet do, though? It seemed to me that it brought it out of sort of a little communal thing to a much wider audience, would also give you more visibility. Is that good and or bad?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It did some good things and some bad things. Vidders were not necessarily looking for visibility. Vidding was very much a kind of cultural conversation that people were having, with each other, kind of within a community. In many ways, it was more like a book club or another kind of a discussion group about popular culture. Vidding is a form of speech, like much creativity is a form of speech. And so it was a way of kind of talking about and having a conversation about popular culture, except in the actual language of popular culture. So vidders in particular were not necessarily looking for a bigger audience, and in fact were one of the groups who were last to actually put their stuff on the internet. There was a feeling that it was meant to stay within the community. But kind of recently, with the rise of YouTube and streaming and the tools, people have begun putting their stuff online and making themselves more visible. And then there are obviously a lot of positives about the internet. One of them is that certainly vidders are not the only people to make music videos or the only people to remix video in the broadest sense. And so there's a lot of really wonderful learning happening between different groups of subcultural creators, of video artists. And so that part of it's been very exciting. We're all kind of looking over our shoulders at what the next guy is doing and stealing techniques and tools, and that's been very exciting.
Does it also catch the attention of the movie companies or the big content companies?
It has, though that really hasn't been the problem per se. Even movie companies tend to understand, in particular, when they see a vid, that it's a creative thing. A couple of creators we know really like vids. The people who made the TV show Forever Night, for instance, actually put vids on the DVD release. They actually
Really? Oh, that's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, they put some vids on the when they released. They picked a couple and added them. Other television and movie companies have had kind of vid contests, though. A vid contest is always kind of an artificial thing. When it's sponsored by a company, it never does have the same kind of fun and energy that something grassroots does. But the bigger problem has really been in Web 2.0, where a lot of streaming companies now have kind of filtering software that is just a computer. It's an algorithm that's looking for some amount of copyrighted material. And these algorithms really can't distinguish between a creative work like a vid, which is commentary and critique and transformative and a creative expression, and plain and simple piracy or sharing of episodes. And so that's been a problem when we talk to the people who own those kinds of companies. They tend to say, oh, well, we didn't build this filtering software to filter you creators out. You're just a sort of unintentional consequence, and it's just too expensive to have people. I mean, it's not in our business plan to have people making the kinds of judgments that could distinguish between creative work and speech as opposed to piracy or other kinds of things that they want to eliminate.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things to think about, whether bidding is considered in some corners theft, just as, or unauthorized use of material, just as, pirates, quote unquote, are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a film professor, as you say, and we're talking a lot in film studies and in media studies, and actually in education on all levels about how to teach media literacy. But we're really not anywhere with media literacy. When it comes to textual literacy, we learn to teach people the difference between quotation and plagiarism. We have rules for quotation, and we know what kinds of things are appropriate or not. And we can have why the wasteland is not plagiarism of the millions of sources that it quotes. We have a language for doing that. The media studies landscape is actually not as bright. We actually don't talk in a very sophisticated way about media as a language. And so there is such a thing. There's piracy. I mean, there's copying, but there are lots of things that are really not plagiarism or infringement that are actually quotation and citation and remix and review, and that really needs, we need to be having a more sophisticated conversation, but we kind of can't have it in, it's hard to have in this climate and with these tools.
Have any vidders had their videos taken down or been subject to notices?
Yes, but not typically for what they are in themselves. Really, it tends to be an algorithm that just sort of says some number of notes or some number of images have hit this button. Mostly when we protest those takedowns, if you can get a person to look at it, they'll put them back up. I mean, when they see what it is. The question is try to get the attention of a person, and it's expensive. Eyes and attention and judgment of that kind can be expensive. But there is a real consequence if, creators are just too expensive. If it becomes too expensive to have speech.
Right. Well, so how important is the concept of fair use to bidding?
Oh, it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. Bidding allows, as I say, people to have conversations about current media products. If we were to go strictly by the rules of only being able to use something in that kind of creative work once copyright had expired or once something finally entered the public domain, you wouldn't be able to talk about pop culture for 20, 30, 40 years after the fact. Conversations about popular culture should happen when the culture is still popular. And so if you really want to have a vibrant discourse about popular culture, and I think, again, it's no accident, I think, that bidding came out of a female community. Women have, the women who invented bidding are women fans largely of science fiction and fantasy popular entertainment. And while we love it, there's a lot that if you're a woman, you might take issue with. There are definitely things that you might want to critique even as you think the thing is cool. And to have that conversation, you really need to have it now, not after, you need fair use now, not copyright expiring later.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between fair use and sort of copyright term extension.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people think, well, yes, we agree maybe copyright's too long, so let's just have a shorter term of copyright. That doesn't help in terms of having discourse. That's like waiting 30 years to review a book. You need to be able to review a book, and a book review is a fair use of quotation, citation. It's a derivative work, but it's a derivative work that builds the culture because it's how intelligent people talk. Vidding and a lot of remix is how a lot of intelligent people and creative people talk about popular culture, and it needs to happen now through fair use and not necessarily through copyright extension. I should say I believe we have those rights now. I'm a member of an organization called the Organization for Transformative Works, and we're fairly conservative on copyright in that we believe we already have the rights in the law to have fair use of these materials for conversation. I don't think that we necessarily even need a change in the law. I think people are kind of abusing the extant law, which does allow for fair use of material for any number of scholarly and discursive purposes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You read my mind. So tell me how the Organization for Transformative Works came to be and what you're doing now.
Yeah, we're really an advocacy group and also a nonprofit group that kind of rose up in response to the commercialization of the web in Web 2.0. The internet that I and lots of the kind of geeky women like me first joined was a much more nonprofit internet than we have right now. It was an internet that took place on university servers and government servers and BBS servers, and it was a little more of the Wild West, but it was a little bit more nonprofit. As big companies and big money have come in to the web, increasingly decisions are being made for profit reasons, and things that are not profitable, like distinguishing between vids and piracy, are increasingly, those decisions are getting made in favor of corporate interests. And so the Organization of Transformative Works was founded partly to kind of provide some nonprofit alternatives, to provide server space that was sort of for the people, by the people, no commercial interests, to host non-commercial fan works, and also to try to get a seat at the table as a nonprofit group to advocate for some of these smaller voices that may not matter to a big business plan. When YouTube fights Google, these are big companies. They may not care about a few vidders, but we're trying to get a seat at some of those tables where the legal arguments are happening that can decide the future for not just vidders, but for any number of remix artists, political vidders, anime vidders, other people who do all sorts of remix that is important in the culture.
Right, that's what I was going to ask, because this is the organization does more than just vidding or just more than just fans. There's a whole big cultural discussion that needs to take place about what's useful, what needs permission, what doesn't.
Yes, that's right. And I think what's wonderful, again, the Internet's provided a way for groups to talk to each other. I was talking before about how wonderful it was that creatively, you could see what other kinds of artists and creators were doing. But it's also providing a way for creators to kind of band together to see the places of overlap. I do think it's important to remember, remix right now is maybe the art form of the moment in the broadest sense, from the high arts of collage to the low arts of YouTube video or whatever. On all fronts, remix is really important. But I like to stress the fact that remix really came out of minority and subcultural communities. Even though lots of people are kind of using it as a form, in the way that hip hop came out of African American communities, vidding was done by women. A lot of it is a kind of outlet for important speech that would otherwise be neglected. And so you might say, well, what do we care about a few guys making anime music videos, or a few women making videos about Star Trek, or Jonathan McIntosh talking about Buffy? Is this important? And the answer is, yeah, it really is important. These are important voices from people, creative people, who are expressing themselves and trying to talk back to big media, which is difficult enough as it is. And I think we have to work to have a climate where it doesn't become impossible.
Francesca, thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for talking.